One of the things with the straight line system I teach people is that, you have 4 seconds. Now, you could say there's 3. Harvard said there's second. I said this back literally in 1988. You have 4 seconds to establish that you're 3 things. Number 1, sharp as attack, enthusiastic as hell. This is in a sales setting, an expert in your field.
Right.
And the idea is that, number 1, that you're sharp, you're on the ball, you're not going to waste someone's time. Number 2, enthusiastic. And I don't mean the mistake people make with that is they think of enthusiastic as like that guy Tony Little on the Gazelle. Hey, come buy the Gazelle. I'm talking about something very different called bottled enthusiasm. As you said, better than great. Like, listen, how you doing today, John? Like, not how you doing today. Like, I say, how you doing today means that I know that I don't give a shit how you doing today. It's a perfunctory greeting we give in English. And so I say, how you doing? Yeah, good, fuck you. That's over, right? But I say, how you doing today? They're like, well, this is the tonality. He really wants to know. He actually cares.
Yeah, you're talking about that transfer of energy, right? That transfer of enthusiasm.
And then most importantly, though, of all those, the third one, an expert in your field. So what I realized very early in the game here, when I was in my early 20s and running this small firm at the beginning, is that I was able, for some reason, to close people that my kids, I was 23, they were 19, 20, right? They couldn't, and I realized what was happening. I had a certain way of sounding that people perceived me as an expert.
Sure.
And when you're perceived as an expert, people will defer to you. They'll allow you to control the flow of an encounter. So the idea with the straight line system is that you want to be, we'll say, perceived, sound like an expert, and when you're perceived those 3 things, sharp, on the ball, enthusiastic, expert, people will say, okay, it's a person worth listening to because they can help me achieve my goals. So what's the kind of counterpart to that in your world?
So, I mean, the one thing that I guess you could potentially be an expert at is the conversation. So we're talking to people who want to just go in, communicate better with their coworkers, communicate better with somebody at a bar, make a friend if they're at some sort of networking event. And what we talk about oftentimes is that you can communicate either the news in conversation, or you can go a level deeper and talk about values, things that you care about. So when somebody asks you in the office, what did you do this weekend? A non-expert way of answering that is to tell them what you did. First I watched this movie, then I watched this, and then I watched the ball game. A deeper way that goes to recognizes that this is just some stupid perfunctory thing that we all say because we don't know what to say next to the water cooler is to talk about something that you give a damn about and say, I watched the ball game because I'm crazy about the Nats. I've been a fanatic since I was 6 years old, and my dad used to take me to the game, and he was in town this weekend. It was so great. And when you talk about things that you care about, what you do is you go a level deeper, and even though that person might not care about the Nats or baseball, they can relate to doing something with their dad that they loved. And then they can respond and say, oh, that's crazy. My dad's coming into town next week. We're going on a snowboarding trip.
Okay.
And so when you go in deeper into the values things, the things that you care about, I don't know that makes you an expert, but what we find is it has a broader degree of being able to connect with a wider range of people, even when on the surface level, there might not be a ton in common with what you did this weekend and what they did that weekend.
The other thing I'd say is I think depending on the context, when you're selling, expertise is what matters, right? But if it's something where you're trying to make friends, maybe it's that you make the people around you feel good. So just establishing that you're positive or that you're funny. And when you're approaching a person that you're attracted to, maybe it's about conveying that you're confident, or again, that you're fun, that you're attractive, that you're playful. So
that you're an expert Lothario, right?
It's kind of like you're not necessarily.
Have you guys studied any of the dating stuff like that?
Sure, lots of it.
And what's your thoughts on that?
I think there's a ton of bad advice, and I think there's a lot of great advice. And I think the hardest thing is when you pick someone to learn from, it's very hard to only learn some things. And so I think when you have someone who's maybe a little scummy, has some good advice, it's tough to pick out the good stuff without adopting some of their bad stuff. And I think that's why that industry is so tricky. Because I do think that layered in there's some really good advice.
I knew Neil Strauss, who wrote the book The Game originally. Very smart, great writer, by the way, smart
Fantastic
guy.
I think that's his greatest skill.
Yeah, and within that book, there's a lot of interesting stuff that does overlap with things that I have taught for many, many years. I think the problem is that the intent of a lot of the people is not a good intent.
Yeah.
In other words, it's one thing if you're looking to, hey, who am I to say about not hooking up with lots of girls? I mean, I did, right? It's easy for me now. I'm older. I'm like, oh, why are you doing that? And
Sure.
take it, but no.
Well, I don't think that's a bad intent.
Yeah.
But the intent is
think
you want to leave them
deceive,
better than you find
I
them.
don't exactly. I think there's a problem. This whole idea of negging, making this sort of like, I don't like. It's to me, it's like I think there's a more positive way to go about connecting with people and making yourself have value to them in their eyes, and making them feel insecure.
So there's a great example from the game. There's this idea of making up a fake question to start a conversation. That's bad. It's lying.
I agree.
It's also totally unnecessary though, because what it's trying to
There's
teach
a much better version
is don't walk up and shyly say, "Hey, you're really pretty. Can I buy you a drink?" Right. Instead, start with an interesting conversation. But that can be an honest part of the conversation. And so there's this thing where it's
almost like lazy thinking. In other words, there's a much better version of that. Yes. Is to be interesting, be cool. Right, but be congruent and honest,
and
recognize, they're not mutually exclusive. Right?
Recognize that people in bars specifically are out to have fun, and so if you approach them in a way that's low energy and boring, you're sucking the fun from them. You're basically taking value from their night.
Very good point.
Come in and make it fun. But then again, the overreach is like, and the way you do that is by making up a story about, I think there's literally one about like little people having a fist fight outside. It's like, you don't have to do that. Just think of your own life and what's interesting or something in the moment that's genuine.
Right.
So it's weird. The dating industry is weird because it's got good stuff, but layered in with really
well, this is why
bad advice.
We talk a lot about the mindsets as well, because unfortunately what it boils down to is if you give everyone just the tricks, just the surface level stuff, they will just copy the thing that the cool guy said, and it won't be true for them. And I assume it's the same in sales, which is if you're selling a shitty product and you're the most confident, charismatic sales guy, and this is going to work for you, but deep down you know it's not. It's like this went from being something that was amazing, you were going to share a great product with someone, to now you are screwing people all of a sudden.
And even if you get one sale, you're not going to get any more, because once they get the product, that's it. They're going to think it's crap.
Yeah, well, certainly there's a big, there's two sides to it. One is, you're right. So like I always say that, at the end of the day, what makes a sale ethical, assuming someone's not outright lying, right, is that, are you leaving the customer in a better spot? Are you actually helping them? Is there value? What you're selling is, that you're charging them X, but the value to them is a lot more. Well, that's, in some sense, if you make some mistakes ethically, but that outcome is achieved, well, it's at least a safety gap that you're not hurting people. So I would say, as your safety gap, you want to be selling things that actually leave people in a better spot. But on the other side too, there's just this thought that, and then one of the biggest mistakes salespeople make that I see is they lie when the truth will do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's like, and it's almost like I call it in sales the truth well told, which I stole from McCann Erickson, by the way. That was their phrase about back in big advertising, the truth well told. So the idea with when they teach a straight line is, what is the absolute best version of the truth? There's many ways for me to tell you. Let me tell you a bit about myself. There's 50 paths to say, well, I'm this and that. There's only one that's the best. There's one that's truthful, honest, sounds amazing. People say, wow, oh boy, that's the one you want. There's many ways to describe your product. Only one of them is the actual best way. It's interesting, it's logical, it makes sense, it's cool, and it's honest. So I think a lot of it's lazy, lack of preparation, and what happens with many salespeople and people in situations in life is that when we run out of intelligent, smart things to say, we tend to say stupid shit. Or we'll default to things that we run out of the right things to say, and then our brain almost just fills in whatever comes out. And for those that aren't naturally adept, sometimes some really bad stuff comes out.